Okay, we're live. I'd like to call the regular monthly commission meeting to order. Today's Tuesday, April 28th, and the time is 6:02.
Almost there.
Oh, there's a little delay there. Okay. Any changes to the agenda before I get started? I guess I do have one under new business. We'll discuss Sarah Scampser.
All right. So question, Jim, this is Gil.
Yeah.
And I don't know how you guys plan to run these Zoom meetings, but of course you can put on the screen, right? And we can all see it. So Jim, if you were to put on the agenda or the document on your screen, we could all see it. Do you know how to do that?
Yep. I think I'm doing it right now.
Okay, that'd be great. Thank you.
That's not it.
There you go.
There you go.
You can see the commission one?
Yes,
Okay.
perfect. Good job.
Okay. Okay, I do have one public comment that came in this afternoon, and I will read it off. Okay, the fellow's name is Ronnie Ray Ogg, affiliation representing sport fishing. The agenda item that he wrote in is, please let us launch boats. His comment is, charter boats are advertising that they are fishing on 1st of May. Is the boat launch in South Beach going to be open? So those of us that fish on our own boats can go fishing also. I have an annual launch pass, so I would not touch anything. I think we've kind of discussed this quite a bit, but if Sarah, Paula, if you'd like to comment.
Sure. Yeah, that's been a few requests out there from some folks, especially folks that have annual launch passes, that we can allow them to basically open up the ramp. And we had a lot of discussions. I've been in so many Zoom calls with a lot of folks from the state to the county. As you know, the city county just had a meeting yesterday extending the lodging to through the May 31st. The governor hasn't extended hers yet, but we assume that the same thing will. As I was listening to the meeting from the city county yesterday, I think other than one gentleman, it seems like everyone was agreeable to that date of May 31st, as a lot of people still are afraid of opening the town to tourists. The problem for us at the marina has been the fact that we can't really tell who's tourist, who's not. Some people, said, well, you could put somebody that check in. We don't have the staff, neither want to put our staff out there to be checking IDs. And volunteers can be difficult as well. So, and we can't really distinguish a tourist from a local, because we do get federal grants, we get state grants. So this is not just a local marina. This is it's a public marina. So we have to make that clear to folks. It's very difficult for us to come up with one decision that will make everyone happy. If we open the marina completely right now, there will be a lot of upset people that we are inviting in a way a lot of tourists to come here and use it, because most marinas, are close around us. It's interesting because the folks from the south Some of them are open, but everyone from the north are closed. So, you know, we have people saying, why don't you open? Because the south people are open, but then the folks from the north said, don't open because, you know, then people are going to be pushing us to open. So there's no good way to do this. So we found that the best way is to only keep the commercial vessels emergency and our mortgages, because the mortgages, it's a tenancy thing. It's not the general public. And we are going to, and we have also talked to a lot of ports through the Oregon Public Ports Association, and how everyone is managing this. Even some folks from the south, they said there were times when they were about to close because they had way too many people. I understand that the halibut season is starting May 1st, but that's for the short sea folks. The actual season, I've been working with ODFW on and off. As a matter of fact, I just got another email from them just about 2 hours ago saying that they're intending to perhaps open on May 14. And what I've been telling the county and the city is our intent is not to be closed around halibut season, because that would be very difficult for us to manage. But we're trying to figure out what is the best way to do this. We're trying to work with ODFW to see if there's a way that they can work in sync with the region. And they're willing to work with us, but right now they're still trying to figure that out. So it's not a hard date yet, but as of today, the last email I got 2 hours ago, they're talking about May 14. I also have been exchanging emails with Commissioner Jacobson about working with her and some of the other ports around the area here, at least in Lincoln County, and trying to figure out something that we can concisely agree on. So we're most likely will be talking in the next couple of days and trying to come up with something that is agreeable. I think it is important for us to work with our partners on this because while we have the city and the county trying to protect the citizens of the region, it would not be good for us to go ahead and open up to everyone. And that's kind of how I've been working through this. I don't know if you have any comments on that.
Thank you. I think that kind of summarizes where we're at, and I don't have anything to add. Any of the commissioners?
Yeah, hey Jim, I was talking with Tom Simpson, a Marina user, and he was not able to get to his email because he's having some dog issues. But he sent me a message. You mind if I read it into the record for him?
Not at all. Go for it.
Okay. This is from Tom Simpson. He's a resident of South Beach. First, I think it's a not very good deal and a very bad decision on the part of the county commissioners and city leaders not to include the ports in the decision-making process as equal partners. In particular, the Port of Newport, as it supports so many families in the fishing business and spur industries related to fishing. Secondly, there has to be a way to open up the ramp at the marina for recreational use. The Port of Alsea has all the Southern Oregon and all the Southern Oregon ports south of Reedsport. I heard your argument that the South Beach Marina compares to I-5 and the southern ports compared to a county road as far as traffic. But somehow, some way, the Port of Newport needs to come up with a plan to open up soon. I can't believe keeping the ramp closed will not have a significant financial impact on the port. RV parks can stay closed for short-term rentals, but the ramp needs to get open. I wish I had a solution to the problems it may cause, but as I sit here tonight, I'm finding that's above my pay grade. Again, thank you and your fellow commissioners, Paulette, and the paid staff of the port. So that was from Tom Simpson.
Okay, thank you, Walter.
So Jim, I have a couple comments and questions.
Okay.
So Paula, my first question to you is you discuss, and you have this comment in the notes from the last meeting, that that we are a public port. And I couldn't quite figure out in reading your couple sentences whether that's a legal definition that we could not open just to locals or to the port members of the port district as compared to the entire state. So is that just your general feeling, or is that a legal interpretation?
I had conversations. Again, my understanding, when you do get federal funds and you get, state funds, and in this particular case, because it is an area of the port that is open for the public, that we have to treat them equally. And as a matter of fact, discussing this with I can't remember if it was in the, it was one of the meetings with the ports. I can't remember if it was, I guess it was not the Oregon Public Ports, because Gary Baldy was in this meeting, and but it was, other ports were in this meeting. So anyway, Gary Baldy said themselves also that the same concept. They did talk to their attorney as well, and it was the same issue. It's either you close it all or you open the whole thing, or you can. And in this case, with us, we have mortgage, which it's a legal agreement that we have with those folks, and we can open that portion. But if you're gonna open for the public, you either gotta open the whole thing or keep everything closed.
Okay, so that is indeed a legitimate legal interpretation.
It is.
That can be used. That's important to communicate to the public, particularly the locals, and people who want to go fishing who live in our port district.
Yeah, folks gotta understand that we do get a very small percentage of our funds from taxes. Most of the port business is funded through grants and loans and things like that. And so especially when there is federal and state funds involved, we have to be very careful in how that is managed.
Okay, so I understand the need to be careful for sure, but I didn't know from a technical legal perspective whether you could indeed close just for those who weren't from the district. But you're arguing that legally, technically, that's not the case. It has to be either all open or all closed to all people, including those who may be from out of state.
That is my understanding. That is the conversation also I had with our attorney related to the commercial marina. That was actually one of the issues we had, and I specifically had that conversation. I did not talk to him specifically about the recreational, but I did talk about the commercial, that we couldn't also only receive the local fishermen, for instance, and close to the California and Washington vessels, for instance. Same exactly situation, because again, we're a public port, and legally we wouldn't be able to do that without getting sued.
Okay, then the other question, and I'm sorry to take up so much time, is about the halibut opener. I'm not quite understanding, I think, what you said. So you're saying that right now ODF&W is planning to open the May date, correct? And
yes.
That the port has to decide if that indeed is going to be their opening date, whether you're going to open the ramp or not. And we put you in a difficult situation if you did not open the ramp, given how many people depend on that ramp. I assume all the other ports on the coast are facing the same issue. You're
exactly.
not the only one. And it's interesting that they might do that. And I'm sure they're probably waiting for advice from the governor's office on that, would be my guess, right? So is this still really, because if you open it for halibut May 15th, my guess is it's going to be hard just to shut it down again and say no one else can fish, right? You're basically opening it up for recreational fishing thereafter. I assume that's the case, right?
Gil, you got it exactly right. This came up just about, I would say, a couple weeks ago. We start discussing that, learning that, oh, well, halibut season's coming up. you know, and we have the governor's order, we got the county, the city order going on. How do we handle that? Because we're just not prepared to handle a whole bunch of upset people, you know, trying to come, hey, the season is open, why you close? It makes no sense to most everyone. So we reach out to ODFW and ask, how are you guys managing this? Because the governor is saying, here's, you know, stay home, don't do this, keep the recreational to a minimal. And then you guys open the season, which put us in a very bad situation. And their comment is like, I guess we didn't think about, you know, how you guys would manage your end, and I totally get it. So they start talking to us. So since then I've been getting more emails about their updates, and they apparently have been working now with the governor, and or at least their director has been working with the governor. And they also ask the county and the port, you know, so what's your plan? When do you plan on opening? And so I just notified them that the county city had extended this through the 31st. But again, they have this this intended what they call a tentative date for May opening, but they will be considering the situation. Again, I had just discussed this through a few emails with Katie Jacobson about, you know, including a couple other ports, at least the ports here in the Lincoln County area in the Marina and Depot Bay. And how we're gonna do this all together, you know, so it's a concise situation. And even if, because what I'm telling the county is like, well, even if you close until the 31st, but if ODFW open, it's gonna put us in a very difficult situation. Because how can we be closed and manage all this? I don't know how we're gonna handle that, to be quite honest. So I think, in my opinion, if ODFW opens, we should open it.
Okay, sorry about that. I imagine we'll be talking about this more in the next few weeks, but thank you. Any changes to the consent calendar or motion to approve the consent calendar as is?
No changes, and if there aren't any, I'll move that we approve the consent calendar.
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay, we're gonna roll right into our presentation. Sarah, were you, where are you?
So I have a slide deck. If you don't mind, I could share my screen so that you all can see it.
Yeah, let's do that and have you share yours. That would be the best. Thank you.
Yeah, you bet.
And Jim, I just would like to, first of all, thank Sarah Means for being here today and for being willing to do this presentation. I truly appreciate that.
Oh yeah, no problem. I'm happy to do it. Happy to do that. So can I share my screen over yours, James?
Yes, you can.
It says I cannot.
Oh, might be beyond my Zoom ability, but
You have to release your screen. It should be in your, you know, in your control panel.
got
You just
it.
have to let go of it, Jim.
Okay.
He has a share screen button. Just click that and unshare, and she should be allowed.
Okay, you
There
should
we
be
go.
good to go now.
Good to go. Okay, there you go. And before we jump into this, Paula, can we maybe connect offline on that ODFW conversation? I just, in a meeting right before this, was alerted to some of that. And so I'm wondering if you and I can just connect tomorrow on that topic, that would be great.
That would be great. Thank you, Sarah.
Okay. Great, yeah. Okay, so thanks everybody for having me here today. I'm going to try and keep this, as efficient and succinct as possible, but also get you the information. I know some of you have already seen this before, likely, and so apologies for the duplication there, but I think it's really important to get this information out. So I appreciate the invitation to present to you tonight. Framework on reopening Oregon. I think this is at the top of everybody's list in terms of interest. We're all very interested in what this might look like and when this might happen. I will say this is the draft. We are likely to see a more final version of this likely next week. So stay tuned, but we're very interested in feedback on this particular version. I'm going to do my best to answer your questions. I'm just going to apologize in advance and ask for grace and patience as I say, I don't know. That's a great question, but let me get back to you. Public health is certainly not my area of expertise, and so I'm a little bit out over my skis on this, but hopefully we'll get you some good information to share moving forward. And then I'll just say, this presentation you'll see certainly information coming from the federal government and the president and what he has issued in terms of framework guidelines for reopening. That was really informed both by the states, and then, the states' framework is informed by the federal government's framework. And so this was very much a two-way street. And you're going to see that as we go through the presentation. There are a few differences in what Oregon is proposing, and I'll point those out as we go along. I think this is a really important foundational statement to make as we enter into the framework. We don't make the timeline for this virus. The virus makes the timeline. Dr. Fauci says that often, but we are really dealing with a public health emergency, and we need to acknowledge that and certainly take guidance from our public health officials, but understanding that this virus is really making its own timeline right now. And the reality that we are living with this virus until there is immunity is something I think we're all starting to acknowledge, and that really is many months off. And so the best we can do is really understand and acknowledge the timelines and the need for vaccines and immunity, and do our best to work within that while keeping our economy open and as best we can, and people safe and healthy. This is a really great visual representation of some modeling work that we have done at the state level. That blue line is indicative of cases or hospitalizations, given that we continue aggressive interventions, so the social distancing standards and whatnot. The orange line indicates what modeling suggests would happen if we were to relax those interventions. And so what you see there is a pretty significant spike in cases. So, the bottom line takeaway here is that, modeling suggests that reducing social distancing too quickly will create a spike in cases. And that's exactly, really what we're trying to avoid here. So President Trump, as I mentioned, issued his Opening Up America guidelines on April 16th. So just about a week and a half ago, even though it feels like years ago at this point, in my world, certainly, and I'm sure probably for you as well. All of this is being vetted by the governor's medical advisory panel and the Oregon Health Authority. They've been doing that both last week and this week. It's likely that we'll continue to see a little bit of difference between the federal guidelines and the state guidelines as we move forward, but just acknowledging that this is really still a draft. So with the framework, there's really three sort of distinct categories, if you will. There's the gating criteria, and we'll go through these in a bit more detail in the following slides, but there's the gating criteria, so three components to that. downward numbers or declining numbers in terms of symptoms and cases, and then regular procedures and adequate testing within the hospital system and their capacity. Core state preparedness, this is really where a lot of the heavy lifting we believe will be in the coming weeks, but 3 components there as well. Again, coming back to testing and contact tracing, that's going to be a theme through this, and certainly we're hearing a lot about that in the media and the public these days. Healthcare system capacity, again, that's really a nod toward PPE and surge capacity needs. And then we're going to talk about this a little bit more, but there are a number of plans for health and safety that need to be in place. All of this prior to even entering phase 1. So right now we're looking at a phased lifting of restrictions with 3 distinct phases. So just to get into the gating criteria in a little bit more detail, again, though, it's really this trend of downward trajectory. So as it relates to symptoms, we're talking about downward trajectory in influenza-like illnesses reported within a 14-day period of time, and a downward trajectory of COVID-like symptom cases within that same 14-day period. So that's an and. We need to see both of those happening with regard to symptoms. Cases, there's a little bit more flexibility built in here in that it's certainly a downward trajectory, but you can either, depending on situation and a variety of factors, you can look at straight documented cases over a 14-day period, or the percentage of total over a 14-day period. So a little bit of flexibility there, but still clearly that downward trajectory is needed. And then with hospitals, they need to be able to treat all patients without crisis care and have robust testing programs in place for at-risk healthcare workers, and that includes the emerging antibody testing. You'll see in that box over off to the side of your screen in red print, the governor has been very clear that she's interested in seeing this play out on a regional or county by county basis. And we'll talk a little bit more about that, but I think it's just an acknowledgement that Oregon is a pretty big state, and there are certain areas of the state that have definitely been hit very hard by this. There are other areas of the state that have not. To the best of our ability to do testing and monitoring. And so, it's likely that we're going to see a rollout of reopening based on geography and different plans that are in place. And we'll talk about that a little bit more in a bit. So core state preparedness, again, this is where we think that there's going to be some heavier lifting going on. We're all hearing about testing and contact tracing and the need for that really to ramp up prior to entering phase 1. That's certainly what this is saying. I do want to point out the Sentinel surveillance sites. This is really important in the conversations. These are sites set up for screening asymptomatic cases. So there's good laboratory facilities, well-experienced, well-qualified staff on site to identify and notify on cases. And this is really, what we're talking about here is the transition from passive tracking to active tracking. It's really critical as we enter into reopening the economy. I will say that Oregon Health Authority is working with county health departments over the last week or so, developing a plan for testing and contact tracing. And the medical advisory panel is set to review that. I'm told sometime this week, maybe early next, depending on scheduling. But I bring this up because this is really once we have this information, this is when we will know how close specific counties are to really entering that phase 1 or being able to move into phase 1 of reopening. So really critical data point there. And then back to the healthcare system capacity, again, lots of conversation around PPE and the need to have sufficient numbers, and then, frankly, reliable supply chains to keep those numbers where they need to be. And then ability to surge ICU capacity. And so plans, there's a number of plans listed here. It's probably not everything that we actually need to have in place. State, counties, industries are all going to need to have plans in place. And really, this is just to acknowledge that we're going to be closely monitoring metrics. And in the event that we have a spike in cases and we need to perhaps go back toward more strict social distancing standards, or the opposite occurs and we're meeting our gating criteria and checking the boxes there so that we can move into a next phase. These plans are going to be critical so that we can they're just going to be our guideposts as we move forward with any sort of reopening. So critical piece here that needs to get done. So we've taken you through the gating criteria, the core state preparedness, and so all of that needs to occur. All of that work needs to occur prior to entering phase one. And I think it's really important to say that phase one begins at the governor's direction after all of that work is done and we've demonstrated that we're ready to enter that reopening. So within phase one, so that's where we are now, let's say, in this presentation, we have guidelines for individuals and guidelines for employers. And there's nothing here that is probably too shocking to anyone. For individuals, we've got to practice good hygiene, and they're strongly considering use of face coverings in public, and clearly stay at home if you're sick. For employers, a little bit more in depth and detailed, although I will say we didn't actually do a full shutdown like other states. So many of our employers are still open and operating, perhaps at reduced levels, but they're open, and they've already had to do a lot of this type of work. So our focus has been very much on conversations with the employers that did shut down as a result of the executive order. But we have to have policies in place for social distancing, protective equipment, temperature checks, and sanitation within the daily operations of an individual business. Monitor workforce for symptoms and contact tracing policies for positives. Additionally, in phase one, vulnerable individuals need to continue to shelter in place. When in public, individuals need to maximize the physical social distancing from others. And we're still, examining this. This is a recommendation. That number is a recommendation that you see there. But avoid socializing in groups of more than 10 people. So again, that's under review. We'll get some final guidance in the near term, but the proposal is really to limit gatherings to 10 people or fewer. Common areas where people are likely to congregate or interact need to remain closed. Minimize non-essential travel, and that's the point, particularly with fishing and like charter fish boats and those individuals. I've had a few conversations. We didn't shut those down per se, and certainly not specifically within the executive order, but we did say no non-essential travel. So that, I think we've got to work on some clear messaging there and communication moving forward, because that's definitely caused a significant level of confusion. And then employers are encouraged to continue telework wherever possible in phase one. This is where this slide is great, because it gets to specific activities and sectors of the economy, that's that first column. And then it lists what the federal proposal for phase one has recommended. And then the final column is what Oregon is working on. So there are some differences here that we want to make sure to point out. That for schools and organized youth activities, schools will remain closed in phase one. That's already been established. Schools certainly here in Oregon are closed for the remainder of the school year. The challenge though, and what we really need to talk about is childcare. Childcare was already a challenging situation for many of us pre-pandemic, and we haven't done anything in the last 7 or 8 weeks to help that situation, certainly. So access to childcare is pretty critical, particularly as we start having parents go back to work and they need a safe and healthy place for their children to go. So we have a work group. They've actually, just tonight, actually, Paula, you probably have it in your inbox from me, released guidelines for childcare reopening in phase one. And so we'll have a lot of conversation about that moving forward in the next week. Visits to hospitals and senior living facilities will remain prohibited in phase one across the board. Large venues such as sports, theaters, churches, places of worship, in the federal proposal, they're allowed to open with some protocols, but frankly, it's looking like the governor will have those facilities remain closed during phase one. Sit-down dining, so restaurants and bars, we'll just talk about those at the same time because they are lumped together with the proposal, again, in Paula's inbox. In the federal proposal is suggesting that they can open with protocols for sit-down dining, but bars were to remain closed. What we've done is initiated a work group around this particular sector, got some feedback from business owners, and we've issued some guidelines, some draft guidelines tonight as to how those might reopen into phase one. Non-emergency procedures. Last Thursday, the governor issued a press release allowing for non-emergency procedures to reopen as of May 1st. So done, check the box there. And I know that was really important to particularly our rural hospitals who rely on those types of procedures in their daily business. And so it was determined that they can open those up safely as of May 1. So that is done. Personal services, that's, we're referencing nail salons, hair salons, tattoo parlors, those in service sort of industry operations that could not maintain social distancing and then were explicitly called out in the executive order as needing to shut down. The federal proposal didn't address those. We have a work group working on that. It's definitely a challenge. And we're experiencing that and developing the plan, but hopefully more information to come soon on that particular plan. That one did not get issued today. So this is just to come back to the governor, clearly has said she wants to think about this regionally, whether that be county by county or, as a group of multiple counties that band together to work together to reopen. But we're working on these guidelines right now, and here on your screen it was the initial proposal that we floated to get some feedback on in terms of what it might look like for a county to request reopening from the governor. So those 3 bullet points need to occur. What I can say, we were just updated earlier today that leadership in our office are having conversations directly with counties right now about what this might look like. This is likely to change slightly moving forward, but generally have the same feel in terms of what we would require moving forward from a county perspective to reopen. So stay tuned, more to come, but I think the takeaway here is that we are committed to acknowledging that there are regions of the state that might be considered to reopen ahead of, or for instance, with our coastal communities, you know, there's been a lot of hesitation around reopening sooner rather than later, and we've definitely heard that. So it's an acknowledgement that there are different perspectives throughout the state, and we want to be responsive to that. So that's phase one. I think really the takeaway on this slide is you get the okay to go into phase one, and then you've got to wait 14 days. You've got to pass the gating criteria again, and then if you meet those criteria, then you can be given the go-ahead to move into the next phase. So this is very much an iterative process and will take some time to roll out. This also references phase 2 and phase 3. We have not done much work on those individual phases because we've been so focused on getting the gating criteria and the core state preparedness, and then really the conversations around phase 1 together that, you know, and we're not even there. We've got some time before phase 1, we think, before phase 1 will actually start. And so so we really needed to get that taken care of. And now, you know, now that that's starting to play out, we'll start to have those conversations around phase 2 and 3. So again, more information to come soon on those. This is just an acknowledgement that we've been out doing a lot of these presentations and trying to reach as many people as possible to get the word out, to get feedback and answer questions where we can. And then these are, I mentioned the sector-specific conversations, particularly around restaurants and bars and childcare, but these and personal services. These are the 6 sectors that we started with for phase 1. And so we were able to release restaurants, retail, and childcare today. Personal services, transit, and outdoor rec, we hope will come later in the week, but they're still working. As you might imagine, those have a few more challenges that they need to work through, and so they're doing that now, and hopefully we'll have something soon. And then this is just a high-level timeline on what's coming next. Really, next week is a big week in terms of we hope to finalize a lot of this work and be able to issue the formal guidelines, both from the framework, operational plans, geographic criteria, and then the step-by-step reopening Oregon plan. So hopefully next week that'll occur. And I think it's also important to note that we are coordinating with the West Coast states. So initially that was Oregon, Washington, and California. Yesterday we added Colorado and Nevada to that group. And this isn't to say that, you know, Washington or California will dictate how and when Oregon will reopen. It's really just an opportunity for us to communicate at a high level and try to avoid some pitfalls or unintended consequences that might occur as we start to make these decisions that really, particularly for our border communities, have pretty dramatic impacts. I know the North Coast felt that quite significantly as we were shutting things down with visitors from Washington. So we're doing our best to try and acknowledge perhaps some missteps or unintended consequences and remedy those moving forward. This is just some information on where we're pulling resources from for this framework. If you're bored, please, by all means, take a look at those. But good information there, and certainly it's been helpful as leadership in our office has been pulling that together. So I'm going to stop there because I recognize this is dense and it takes up a lot of time. And I want to be able to answer any questions if there are any. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and happy to answer questions.
So this is Gil. Hey, great, Sarah, that was great. Fantastic job presenting that on such a amazing issue, complex issue. I guess one question I have, this is just looks at the governor's state's big strategy. is we have 50 states, right? And each state is approaching this differently. And we're in this kind of adaptive mode of learning about this virus and what's happening. So the question is, when you have these guidelines, obviously, but there'll be a lot to learn from observing what's going on in the rest of the country, even the world, as we learn more about this virus and how it affects different individuals under different sets of policies that each state adopts. And one other comment I want to make about policies is, you showed that early graph, right? That was done.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was actually done, it might have been done in Consulting, Oregon, but it was actually done by the Institute at UW, who does that modeling work. I actually looked at that model and studied it to figure out exactly the assumptions they're trying to make. It's really interesting how they build those models. But the problem with that model is it shows that extreme graph of the number of cases rapidly increasing under moderate policies versus more severe policies, right, where it stays flat. The problem is it does not, that looks at roughly what I call course policies that were adopted a month ago or 6 weeks ago. It doesn't look at smart policies that are more nuanced, more adaptive, based on learning and based on, as you say, certain geographies. And that's the problem with that graph, because it can be a scary looking graph.
Yeah.
It says basically don't open up
until
you, and that's how even some of my colleagues have interpreted that. And I don't think that's the right interpretation, to be quite honest. And in reading that report that came out of UW, the modeling center there, they made some fairly strong recommendations in that report. And I was curious how that affected the governor's office and your own people, because that could really slow down any opening or any modified adjustments if people look at that and get really worried about how we modify and slowly open in smart ways, as compared to just that simple close or open with drastic outcomes. Sorry, that was my major comment.
Yeah, no, that's great. And I think, you know, I don't know that I'm not the modeler, I'm not the scientist behind the model or anything like that. But what I do know is that the governor is taking her lead from her public health experts here in state. And so, you know, we're looking at the data that we're gathering as well on a daily basis. And, you know, and I think our friends in Baker County, for instance, would agree with you that graph is not indicative of what's happening in Baker County right now, who has, you know, limited testing capacity clearly, but zero tests or zero positive test cases. So, you know, they are very much anxious to open up and enter phase 1. And, you know, maybe that is the right answer for them. I'm not the one that gets to make that determination, but the determination is going to get made based on criteria and information coming from Oregon public health officials. So I think that's an important point. You know, it's both public health officials in Baker County, let's say, just using that example. It's public health officials on the ground in Baker County. It's public health officials at Oregon Health Authority. It's the governor's medical advisory panel that's advising her. And so, you know, these models are great and they're helpful in many instances, but I think, you know, we are really using the model on top of the localized data as well. Any other questions?
Yeah, Jim, I have a question.
Okay, go for it, Walter.
Yeah, Sarah, thank you for everything. This is very, very informative. And I just had a couple questions. My first would be, so say Lincoln County meets the guidelines and under stage 1, what will the restrictions be for us? I mean, will that be allow people from all over the state to come here, or would that be left up to the county to say Lincoln County's good, we're open to Lincoln County residents, but say maybe not Multnomah or Washington?
Yeah, that's a great question and really center to a lot of concerns that our coastal communities have, because we know, and we've experienced this even through the closure, that folks from the valley who might own a second home over on the coast are traveling back and forth, and that's causing some challenges. I don't think we don't have a good answer for that question yet. I think we're still working through that as part of the guidelines. And so, and we are very well aware, and the governor herself is very well aware that, you know, the coast, communities on the coast have their own set of unique challenges, whether that be supply chain, you know, difficulties because you're in a more rural area of the state and we don't want to put strain on the supply chain, or vulnerable populations in, you know, concentrated areas. And so we've got to be thoughtful in how, particularly working with our coastal communities, how we do open those up eventually. And I think it's also important to say, you know, I think this, yes, it's the governor's decision to say you're in phase 1, you've met the criteria, you can move on. But I think this is going to be very much a conversation between the communities, maybe the Board of Commissioners, and other elected bodies, and the governor's office. I think this is going to be a little bit more, a little bit less like we're going to submit your proposal and she's going to stamp it and say good, we're going to go, and more like a conversation.
All right, thanks, Sarah. That's pretty much, you answered my question, and thank you for coming again tonight.
Thank you very much, Sarah. Does anyone else have any final questions for Sarah? Okay, thank you for joining us.
Great, I'll take my leave. Thanks so much, everybody. I appreciate the time.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Sarah.
Thank you.
Okay, we're going to go on to old business. We didn't remove anything from the consent calendar. And then item B, accounts paid. Does staff have any comments on that, or do commissioners have any questions?
I have no questions. Thanks, Jim.
Okay, I do not have any questions. Gil.
Questions? Yeah, me too.
Okay, let's move on to item C, General Manager Annual Performance Evaluation, which we completed.
Jim, I would make a motion that we approve accounts paid.
Oh, yes.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, General Manager Annual Performance Evaluation. We had that meeting tonight, starting at 5, ending at 5:44, I believe. And it went well. And I'd like to maybe go around to the commissioners and get your input. If you have any, I look to Walter for some insight on proposing merit wage increases and such.
I would just make sure if everybody read Paula's contract, and it's up to either the commission or Paula to suggest an increase. But what I would like to do to promote a little stability at the port, I would like to make this a 3-year contract and not go year to year.
So just to make sure I understand, the contract could be for 3 years. Does the salary stay firm for 3 years? Is that what you're proposing?
You're on mute, Walter.
Sorry, it would be with the same increases would be possible, but it would just be for 3 years instead of having to review it year to year. And we would still do the review, but we would not have to renew the contract every year.
Got it. So this is just about contract renewal, but the salary's in the contract. That's why I was asking that question.
Yes. Any adjustments would be done on a year-to-year basis.
On a year-to-year basis. Okay, thank you.
Well, we'll have to draft something up accordingly, but I think a 3-year contract with the ability for annual reviews is a good combination.
So do I.
For budget purposes, the sooner we have what you're going to offer, the better, so we can put the budget together.
Yeah, I believe that will come here shortly. I'll take a recommendation from anyone that wants to provide one at this point.
Well, if I may so, since you mentioned my name there, Jim,
Sure.
I had a conversation with Jim before, and the only thing I look at it is we have 3 similar ports in the coast and in the Oregon coast, which is Coos Bay, Astoria, and Newport. And I understand Coos Bay has a bit more cargo than we do, but all 3 ports are very similar as far as asset goes. As a matter of fact, I think we have a bit more assets than Astoria, and as far as revenues and all, we actually are sitting in a slightly better situation than Astoria. And from what I've seen, the new manager, which has just been appointed, and he did not have an experienced position in being a director there before, but he I think he was hired about 7 months ago or so. He got a salary of $141,000, and then last I checked, Coos Bay back in and the previous director before him, it was at a 158 or somewhere similar to that. And then Coos Bay was at 152,000 back 8 years ago. So I'm sure they're way more now. I couldn't find their salary. So the only thing I would ask is to be equitable to similar ports around the area. Last year when I accepted this position, I realized you did not have that on your budget, so I did not request that. But certainly, the responsibility here is not any lesser than those 2 ports. So anyway, that's the only thing I have to say.
Jeff.
So I've hesitated to speak first. I do believe I've looked up online salaries of comparative ports, and I do believe Paula has done a very good job this year. And I was thinking more than a minimal increase. I was having a hard time coming up with a number. I kind of hated to be the first to propose something, but I do think it needs to be more than minimal, more than cost of living. And I'll leave it at that and see what other people have to say before I would propose a number, see if anybody else wants to.
So this is Gil. So this surprises me a little bit because I didn't realize, Paula, that you had taken a salary to start this position that was significantly lower than your colleagues at other similar ports. So it's one thing to get a salary increase for doing a good job, right? Merit, but it's another thing to try to bring it up to a level that is competitive, because the original salary was not really established to be competitive, as you were arguing, because the port, someone had argued, did not have the resources at the time, whatever that exactly means. But and I wasn't a commissioner there, so I'm not quite understanding the problem. But I think the question for the commissioners is, do we would expect her to have, given her experience and job she's done, a salary equitable to those other ports, if those ports indeed are basically in the main line of ports up and down the West Coast, in terms of establishing a competitive, salary. And I might look the rest of you commissioners who've had more experience on this, because I was thinking of dollars for a merit, but not looking at an equity issue of trying to get the salary up to a competitive level. So any other comments by the commissioners, I'd appreciate, because you have more knowledge than I do.
Walter?
Well, I wouldn't say I have more knowledge than any of you, so that's kind of put me on the spot. So I would kind of go along with what Jeff and Gil are saying. I would go with what the, a percentage increase. I think that it would be a big jump right now to make it automatically competitive with everything. And not because it's not deserving, but, we are going into some pretty uncertain times right now. And looking at the perception, I think that that's something we should, maybe discuss now that we have a 3-year contract, maybe a stepped up thing to increase it to make the position more competitive or at a competitive salary. But I'll leave the number to suggest to Jeff, but like I said, I do think an increase is above just straight merit is warranted, but I'm not, my gut feeling is that the perception of going a huge increase would just not look good right now. But I would be interested and willing to entertain, a step increase to bring it up to that.
So just for clarity, sorry, just make sure I understand, Chuck, Walter, what you're saying. Are you saying step in terms of across, let's say 2, 3, or 4 years to bring it up to equity? Is that what you mean?
Yeah, I would.
Am I understanding you correctly?
Yeah, and if that's our goal, I'm just floating that out there. If we bumped it up to 160,000 right away, I think that would raise a lot of eyebrows, regardless. Like I said, in the past, it's been worked at, it's been what the general manager over and above, if there was to be over and above what a general increase was, that was usually negotiated like we're doing right now. And usually the general manager had kind of an idea what they wanted, and the commission was kind of in a willing to discuss everything. I'll say that.
Okay, well, right now it's $128,000 per year. Our posted range for this when hired is 113,505 to 141,129. I've heard that the Astoria GM is at 141. If we're looking at percentages, 10% would bring her to that. 8% would bring it to 138,240. I'm just throwing some numbers out to discuss. Figuring we should probably start looking at percentages and what's right. I'm all for bringing up to scale with more courts over the next 3-year period, but I guess we need to figure out what we want to do tonight and for the first year and see how everyone feels about that. Jeff?
I had thought of a number just to try to come up with a number, and that number was a $10,000 raise. That's 7.8%. That's something I had just thought coming into this if I had to propose a number.
Other commissioners?
Yeah, so I'm okay with the step idea, but I do think it needs to be brought up to a competitive level if indeed those ports are representing a competitive level. So I don't know if we need to do it over 3 years. We could do it over 2 years. So a 10% increase this year and then a 10% increase the following year, assuming excellent performance. Would be close. I'm not doing the math right now, but might be close to what we're seeing for those other major Oregon ports on the coast. I'm just spitballing, so looking at you guys with more experience here. But we do need to bring, I mean, Paul is good, and we need to bring her up to a competitive level. Whether we do that in 1 year or 2 years or 3 years, I think, are we agreeing with the general principle? It's just a question of how quickly we do that.
I mean, I agree with the general principle. I don't know if we want to put numbers in the contract for the next 2 years. We can think about that. I mean, it might be just per annual evaluation and per state and health of the port, especially with what we're going through. You know, I think for this year, we should definitely keep it within the posted range, because that would be a red flag. And I'm okay in the 8 to 10% area. I also kind of came up with what Jeff did earlier and worked out 7.8 for a $10,000 raise, which is roughly 8%. But yeah, we'll keep throwing this around.
My suggestion would be to not set expectations for following years. I think the general performance evaluation was we're very happy. My suggestion would be not to set an expectation for future years, but just to say that we're going in the direction of being competitive, and that's what we're doing this year, and we'll address next year.
Right, but if we say competitive, so there's equity, then we are, while we're not pinpointing exact number, we are suggesting the general trajectory of the amount and direction we're going in.
I
Yes,
think
and
so.
I
And
would-
go ahead.
sorry.
Go ahead.
So no, I would. That's well put, Jeff. And I just rounded up to 8%. And I also think that would be contingent on good reviews, and that our goal should be making it competitive. And that would also allow us, say, if one of these other ports hired someone for a much larger amount, that we don't have to play catch up with that. So, like I said, I'm fine with 8, and then with the goal of the commission to bring it up commensurate with other ports of the same size and facilities.
Sorry about that. Paula, would you like a chance to comment? I know you're doing a great job, and our goal is to keep you here and provide stability to the Port of Newport. And that's an important piece.
No, I really appreciate that. I'm okay, anything between 8 and 10. It's not untypical for initial evaluations for directors, port general managers to be at 10% the first year. And I did not have anything going into the 6 months, which often there is a change there as well to start with. But I am totally fine with anything around that. I just eventually, like I said, I certainly would like to catch up with other ports. We are doing that here internally with my staff. I'm trying to bring everybody up to par as well, as you know. So I think that should be something that we do across the board. And I'm good if, and eventually certainly would like to catch up with that. Independent if I'm a woman and the other directors or managers are men, I think we should all be in the same category. So that's the way I look at it.
Okay, any more comments, or would someone like to make a motion?
One question: what do we do about the salary range? Does that get adjusted next year? How does that work for the general manager position?
I'd imagine that will be budgeted in the next, it'll probably be on the step our new staff kind of matrix that's being developed at that time and also go up accordingly.
That is correct. I have already have an initial draft of that ready for review at the budget and then go to the full commission. So yes, it will be.
Anyone willing to make a motion at this time? Gil, you're the only one without your microphone on mute. It must be you.
No, that's not the way it works. So I don't know. I think we're talking about somewhere between 8 and 10%. So I'd cut the difference and say 9% for this next year, whatever that works out to. At least that's I'll just throw that out there.
Would you like to put that in the form of a motion?
Good, I could. So I would propose that we offer Paula a 9% increase in salary for this next contract year. And so whatever that amount, again, do the math, is.
Jeff?
Can I comment or amend?
Yes, you may.
After just thinking as we're talking through it, I was going to just suggest 141,000. It's equal to Astoria. It's within the range, and that's my rationale. And Paula's done a great job, and her experience level, not only comparing the salary to other people on the coast, but also her experience in coming to this position. So I'll just say that as rationale for saying let's go 141.
Just a little bit over 10%.
Yeah.
Okay.
I would second that. I would change my motion. I would second that. That works fine for me.
Okay. All in favor?
Somebody phrase it in form of a motion, please.
So, so Gil should amend his motion and then ask for a second, Jim.
Oh, so okay. So I would amend my motion that instead of a 9% increase, we increase her salary to 141,000. Is that right?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. Can I have a second on that motion, please?
Second.
Okay. All in favor?
Hey, Jim, I just had one thing to ask.
Okay.
Do we need to will the 3-year duration, should that be part of it, or are we just talking dollar amounts?
My opinion is we're just talking dollar amounts here, and then maybe we can bring a draft new contract that for the duration, maybe not tied to salary for that 3 years to the next meeting.
Okay, I'm fine with that. Thanks, Jim.
Okay. Okay, all in favor of Gil's motion?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, unanimous.
Thank you.
Congratulations, Paula, and great
I really
job.
appreciate. Thank you very much.
Yes. Thank you, Paula.
Yeah. Thank you, Paula. Good job.
Okay, we're going to roll right into some new business. Insurance representative and producer of record, Mark Brown. We're on page 83.
So first of all, apologize. I don't know why my camera's not working. I guess it could be the old computer I need to update. So we prepared an RFP, as we are with many of our different contracts we've had for a long time. We set the criteria out in the RFP. We had 4 responders to the RFP, including our current agent of record. Paula, myself, and Aaron reviewed that RFP independently. And independently, we came to the same conclusion that a new agent of record would be called for, which we selected, all 3 selected WHA as our recommended insurer of record, or agent of record. Any questions?
Yeah, Mark, where is WHA? Where are they out of?
They're out of Eugene. They have offices in Salem and Portland as well. They, even before this, they had actually been here, but they had never met Paula or Aaron. It did not play any role in our scoring, however. As we did our scoring, when we were done, I always compare them to make sure that they all stay in the same range. In other words, someone doesn't score someone else higher. And then we even did that comparison.
All right, thanks, Mark. And my only reason for asking that is, you know, in the past we've always tried to go local whenever we could, and you know, we just switched banks from a local one to First Interstate, and like I said, we need to be good with our money and do the right thing, fiduciary wise. But if and try and stay local whenever we can. But I just want to make sure that we get that on the record. But I support what you did, and I think you saving us the money and going with the best candidate works for me.
Thank you, Walter. What I have to put my procurement hat on for a moment here. So we have to be careful when we do that, because if we were to select someone and give them preference because they were local, it actually violates procurement law.
And what I can add to that is we certainly always prefer to hire local if we can. I totally agree with that. But if we're within the 10% range, I think we can do that. But that was not the case here. So we felt pretty strong about, you know, what the other companies had to offer in this particular case. So that's one of the reasons we went that route, I guess.
That is
Yeah,
correct.
I understand completely, and I didn't know what the exact numbers were, and if that's how we have to go and find. I just wanted to make sure that got put on the record.
And I appreciate that.
Jeff?
How much money are we looking at saving?
You know, they're taking their commission and cutting it in half. So that's at least $40,000.
Okay, I like the process, and it's very easy to be transparent when it's done so well like that. So thank you. Anyone want to make our last minute comment, Gil?
No, sounds like they did a very thorough job in evaluating the companies, and I would support the motion that's on the table to bring in WHA.
Okay, do we have a second? Was that formal enough, Karen? Was that?
That's not very formal.
It's not very formal. If somebody could actually read the motion.
All right. So I'll read it. So the commission recommends a motion to authorize the general manager or designee to appoint WHA Insurance as the port's insurance representative and producer of record for all the matters relating to and concerning the port's insurance, and authorize payment of insurance premiums related to this RFP. It sounds like this was written by an insurance agent.
It was not.
Thank you, Gil. Give a second. Was that a second, Walter?
Yeah, it was.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
So tomorrow we're going to issue an intent to award. And that will be out there for 5 days, giving people a chance to protest. And only after the protest period will we issue an actual contract.
Okay, thank you. And we're going to go right into your report. If you have any highlights you'd like to share.
Yes, I'll just share. I'm gonna be brief because it's mostly in the report. So the closure in the RV park, as we can measure it, is about $22,000. That's just the RV park right now. What it's cost us, every day we get cancellations, but then every day we get additional people wanting to reserve. So as far as we can tell, it's around 22,000 right now. Update on financial institution switch. We're going to install remote deposit machines Monday. Credit card processing equipment's on the way. And we've, as part of that motion, you authorized to look into and to refinance a $500,000 loan. That was at 6%. We've been able to bring that rate down to 2.5%. And we'll be working on that paperwork shortly. That should save the port another $30,000 to $40,000. Our credit card charges will be reduced in half. The only area of concern in the whole process is really the RV park revenues. They are down, as mentioned, you'll see in the next report as well. But the relative expenses are also down. So we're ahead of where we thought we would be. That's the summary of my report, really, right there.
Okay,
And
well,
we're ahead of last year.
does anyone have any questions for Mark specific to his report?
Yeah, one comment, question, Mark. So, in looking at the documents, I was trying to figure out, because we are maybe in better shape than maybe I would have thought, I was trying to figure out to what degree that's because we increase fees as compared to usage of let's say, more usage of the port as compared to just higher fees. Any thought about that? Because I couldn't figure out how to pull those two things apart.
And that's not an easy thing to pull apart. That's really.
So I'm asking you.
I know. And that's really, I need to look at a good sales report, which I will do. I think it's a combination of both. The commercial marina is in really good shape, primarily because of a 10% increase last year in mortgage rates and an increase in some of the hoist fees, but we're also having heavier usage. The 10% increase was agreed upon by the commercial fishermen so that we could begin working on the electrical systems on Port Dock 5 and 7. And you'll see that when we come to our budget, that specific comment. There was also an increase in the international terminal, which has put us in good shape. So it's a combination of factors, but I will come back. Well, actually, I will prepare a document comparing usage figures as compared to salary to increases for you.
But I think the bottom line, which makes this so interesting, is that your usage did not decrease in response to these fees. I know that's not true of a couple of the recreational things on South Beach, but it seems like overall that's the case. And so that's interesting.
If I may add to that, Gil, I think there are a lot of services that we didn't have before that had been added, and I got to say that at least from what I learned, I mean, I've been here only for a year, but from how things used to be and how they are now, and in good part from a lot of the work that Aaron has done in making everything more efficient, I think that has helped a lot in capturing a lot of those revenues that were lost for inefficiency or for services that we couldn't offer because the way things were done before. At least I'm sure once Mark does his homework on that, that will come up.
Yeah, so it's usage and it's fees and it's costs. So the sense you get in reading all this is costs didn't go up substantially, services improved, people maintain usage even at higher fees. That's a really good story to tell. Based on everything I'm hearing, that's the story. So it's interesting.
It is, and yeah, it is. It's a good story.
Just anecdotally, I see the terminal hopping and Port Dock 5 pretty stacked with boats. So the terminal looks busier and fuller than ever.
Okay, thank you, Mark. Do you want to go into the occupancy report, or is that really part of your report?
It's really part,
Yeah.
you know, it is down. It's down primarily because of the closure order. However, the good other side of that is our marina, we have 6 slots left is all we have. We've sold out every slip in our marina.
Yeah, they can get their boat in the water now.
That's it.
Well, great. Let's go into Director of Ops report, Aaron.
All right, how
And
about
if you
now?
thought-
How about now?
There you are.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I think just to add to that, one of the things that we've done to increase services is adding extra shifts. We've done a lot more night work over the last 2 to 3 years than the port's ever done before, I think. So it's like I've said before, it's a way for us to, if we can't expand the facilities, we can add to the hours that the facilities are in operations, as long as we have the customers and as long as the operation itself is profitable, as long as it's not costing us money in terms of labor and equipment usage and things like that. I mean, we could always argue about the cost of infrastructure. I think we have a long way to go as far as covering that. But those are some of the things we've been doing over the last several years, or a couple of years or so, is adding, the length of services at the terminal. That extra person that we've had out there has helped Don do more work. You reach capacity with one person a heck of a lot faster than you do at least with 2. So we're able to deliver those services. We have 2 people working, generally speaking, when a terminal is full of boats the entire time. So that's worked well for us. It's been a tough month as far as getting things done goes. We've been affected, as have the people that provide us services. The 3 main projects that we started working on last month was the stormwater drain, the camera installation in South Beach, and then the I have lost the third one here, but in any case, so our service providers have met the same challenges that we have, and it's slowed us down quite a bit. So I hope to have, it's the Campbell repair in NOAA. That's what I was getting at. I hope to have get earthworks started on the pothole repair in South Beach in the next 2 to 3 weeks. We expect that Bergeson will start in the next week to week and a half on the Campbells over in NOAA. And Hyack is just getting started on the cameras in South Beach. And if I could ask, over the last year, I took a number of phone calls from people that were concerned about security issues at nighttime over in South Beach. And I got a few different suggestions. This camera network was one of the ways that we're looking to improve security after hours over there, and I think it's going to definitely have a major impact on the way the facility operates and the safety of things the security of things over there. So if you know of anybody that has talked to you about security concerns in South Beach over the last year, please pass word along to them that was heard, and we're in the process right now of standing up a camera network that's going to do very good things for TCB and us after hours and even during the daytime. It's changed the way the commercial marine is operated, and I expect it'll do the same thing in South Beach. On Monday, we had the kickoff meeting for the Section 107 CAP project with the Army Corps to establish a minus 20-foot channel going through the commercial marina. This is just the very beginning of this 3-phase effort, and we have a number of years to go, but they've assigned a project team and have started to, give them guidance on what their expectations are for the scope of work and the federal interest determination, which are the first 2 things that have to get done before they get to the point of doing the actual feasibility study. So that project is getting moving, and I have monthly calls with the project manager with the Army Corps, Spencer Nairn. So that's moving along, and this goes toward the Port Knox 7 project someday in the future. But the idea here is to open up access to modern fishing vessels over there. Like I said, it's been a really, really challenging month for everybody. We've seen a lot of people absent from work this month, which you would expect. We gave the employees 5 extra days of PTO because we wanted to make sure we have so many new people that the rate at which you accumulate paid time off is very slow in the first several years working at the port. So we wanted to eliminate the motive to have people wake up in the morning and feel scratchiness in their throat or having a cough and say, no, I need to get to work because I don't have any PTO. We wanted to be able to give them room to breathe and to take the time away from work so that we don't have people coming into work sick, especially while we have this virus concern going. So we did that, and they've been used accordingly. We have a number of employees in all areas of the port that have taken several days off because they had actual symptoms of some sort of whatever it was. They saw they sought advice from their doctor and heeded those concerns. So there's been a lot of people out of work lately. I think that our overall take on things will be moving ahead, that if absenteeism becomes an issue, what you'll see is that we will draw services down a little bit. And so it will slow us down. And we have a commercial fishing user group meeting coming up this week that we can talk more with them about that and just let them know about it. But that's the reality of it. We don't want to press the gas down to get people into work during this time because you raise the risk of spreading the virus if it happens to be there. The boat ramp, I put some numbers in there just in case, because I wanted to contribute some data to the conversation about the boat ramp. The weekend just prior to the governor issuing her stay-at-home order, we averaged over that Friday, Saturday, and Sunday about 50 boats out each day. So it was between 40 and 60. I can tell you a decent estimation of people on board for a pleasure craft on average is probably about 3. And so that gives you an idea when you see these numbers about how many people are using the facility during those days. I don't have any data on where those people came from or anything like that, but something to keep in mind as we talk about the boat ramp are a couple of factors. One of them being that during that time period, you're just talking about people that are going fishing for rockfish and lingcod, sea bass, things like that. And so it doesn't usually bring out the crowd that the all depths halibut openers will. So during those days, you can expect to see someplace in the neighborhood of about 2, possibly even 250 to 300 boats out. However, a lot of that's got to do with disposable income and whether or not people can afford to make the trip or if they feel safe to make the trip. And then you also got the weather factors in there that drive whether or not people are going to be there. Added to that, whether or not there's actually fish or whether or not they think there's fish. So there's a lot of factors in there to consider when you look at how many people you think are going to come out to use the boat ramp. We've got a lot of complaints from people that say people have been launching their boats when they weren't supposed to. Every single time I've got a call of that nature, I've talked to people and gone over there and talked to staff at South Beach, and each and every time we've confirmed that they've been commercial operators that we were already aware of. So I talked to the sheriff's department a couple weeks ago. They got underway, went out and contacted vessels. Didn't find anybody who had put their boat in the water that shouldn't have. OSP was underway that day as well. And so I think there's a very tight watch, as tight as we can establish at the boat ramp without having somebody sitting there the entire day watching and counting. it appears to us as though we don't have anybody who's egregiously breaking the rules of the boat ramp. Yeah, we've got just a number of, it's been, like I said, a challenging month. Everything from complaints that we weren't doing enough to complaints that we were doing too much, and calls from concerned people about whether or not we're going to keep certain services open and voicing their concerns about that. So we're just trying to follow the written guidelines as close as we possibly can. And there's always a debate of whether or not we're doing enough or too much. And I think that's going to come up any way you cut the mustard. So I'm glad that we got the EAP program in place, because I know of a number of employees that have used it. We've got folks who have spouses that are laid off, people with, that have larger families that are worried about the same type of things that everybody's worried. And there's a lot of employees that are worried about the impacts of COVID-19. And so it's, like I said, it's good to be able to have that employee assistance program that I know for a fact there's been a number of people that have used it. And that's been very good. I have for you in South Beach, Chris was out for a while this month. He's had some serious issues with an injury, and had a loss in his family. So, but I was able to get the actual number of boat launches at the for the entire month in there, and yeah, I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Any questions for Aaron? All right. I think it looks like you're off the hook for the rest of this. Next report, General Manager Paula.
Yeah, and Jim, before I move forward with my report, I don't know, you mentioned you would make a change to the agenda to add Sarah, but you haven't talked about that. So I don't know if you want to get into that first, or you want me to.
Well, since we don't have a formal letter, I was thinking, I kind of rethought that maybe it's best for you to just mention it in your report until we have a letter of resignation.
Certainly. Okay, so in my report, I squeezed in a lot of information, and a lot of those some of you already know. Most of what I've been dealing with, it's basically the issue with the COVID. And as Aaron already mentioned, with the staff, most everyone is at work except for those that are using some PTO. And we did decide to give that 5 extra days for the exact reason Aaron mentioned. We want to make sure that folks did not come to work feeling sick, or if they're too stressed out, because some people were quite stressed out for being out there and exposing themselves and their families, that they at least had an opportunity to take a couple of days here and there off to, get rid of that stress. And I just gotta say, I truly, truly appreciate everyone here at the port and how they're handling this. Everyone has been a champ, and I couldn't thank them enough for all the work they have been doing out there. And most of them are quite busy, actually. As you heard from Mark's report, our loss so far, it's been very minimal in comparison to a lot of ports. If you talk to, and I think I put some of that here in my report, and during the Oregon Public Ports Association meeting, it was very sad, really, to hear from a lot of the ports. And during this time, just like other businesses, a lot of folks are having huge difficulty, especially those ports that are very reliant on the recreational side, and they had to, especially the North ports, that have to close a lot of things, a lot of their business. And even some of the folks in the South Coast that stayed open, some of them are still having to furlough people, and they've been furloughing people all throughout, and the port here is doing quite okay considering. So and you know, so I'm very thankful to our employees that have been, you know, still out there working. I know there are a lot of stuff out at social media, and that's both for recreational and the commercial marinas. Difficult timing for everyone. Some folks are very scared of being out there, and they really want things to be shut down, while others feel like, well, I just want to go fishing, you know, or I want to protect my family, so therefore, you know, don't bring out of state commercial business here. But you know, those are things that we take it seriously, and we have certainly looked at it every and each way that this should be conducted. And we talked to other ports. We've been talking to, you know, all the partners from the state side to the regional side, from counties and city and nearby ports and so on. And we try to do the best we could. And part of it is also talking to our attorney, making sure that whatever we are doing is legal. Like for instance, with the commercial vessels coming from out of state, you know, this just like the I-5, there is the marine highway that is right here next to us that brings, you know, vessels from everywhere. The borders are not closed for Oregon, so just like there are trucks coming from California, Washington, other places, there are vessels coming from other places, and that's interstate commerce. And unless we've been on a shutdown and the borders are closed, we really couldn't refuse service. I know some states like Alaska have implemented a quarantine for those vessels. Well, that hasn't been the case here for Oregon, so we can't really make people do that. But we did try to implement certain measures here within our docks to trying to keep people safe as we could. It's a difficult situation because we do have a lot of vessels here that tie into each other, and some people were coming from out of state and did that and walk over other people's belongings, and they're unhappy. It's a difficult one. So again, we're trying to implement new measures that avoid some of those issues. It is sometimes impossible when folks come in the middle of the night and do whatever they do, and you know, so but we're trying the best we can. Our employees are out there trying to manage that in a very good way, and they really have done a great job. So I appreciate what they've done. Again, you heard this many times today and before. With the recreation marina, it's a difficult one. I know people just want to go out there and go fishing. We receive from Mark and Aaron and I have received tons of emails and phone calls. And I understand that for the most part, you know, getting in your boat and going out there it's usually a lonely thing that you do, and you don't have to worry about others. However, the concept for us is difficult to know who is local, who is not local, and the intent of the county and the city is to keep the tourists out because they're afraid. Again, a lot of and that happens 1 week before they implemented that new order, that there were lots of people coming here. And I know I live in Nye Beach, and it was like I haven't seen that many people since last summer. You know, I think it's because a lot of people board at home, and they were just coming to the coast. And since North Coast was closed, they decided to come to our coast. So, and how do you separate that, you know, in the ramp at the marina? It's very difficult. So we did the best we could in trying to implement what we did. So far, it's been working well for the most part. Again, as I mentioned to you in the letter, there's no way we're going to make everyone happy. There will be folks that will be complaining if we open the whole thing, and I think that will be, we will get more complaints if we open the whole thing. And there are people that complain if we open close to the general public, but there's no good way to do this. So the easiest way is to close to the general public, which means is anyone that doesn't have an actual agreement with us with the mortgage, because that makes a tenancy right there. And allow, again, the commercial business that can do it as long as they're respecting the state orders to stay out there. So that's what we try to implement it. I talked to some of you throughout this whole process. The biggest concern now, as I mentioned earlier, is the halibut season coming up. You know, I've been exchanging tons of emails with the county now, trying to figure it out. And now other ports in the area trying to figure out a way to work with the ODFW and see if we can coordinate that opening, since the county and the city now had gone ahead and extended their order, mostly related to hotels and long-term, short-term stay in the county to May 31st. Obviously, that does affect our RV park because that's a minimum 30-day stay. We did have some short stay that was that we're gonna have to cancel that was coming up in May. For the most part, a lot of those have been replaced with long-term stay. But again, we don't know how much that's gonna affect us. Probably not as much, as since again we have been able to work around that. But then the biggest part of the intent of staying closed is to again work with the local jurisdiction in terms of keeping the tourists out. It's not to keep people away from the marina, but to keep the tourists out. So there's a misunderstanding there about the separation within the marina. That's not the case. It is to work with our partners in keeping the tourists out. So that's that. And then I also included in my report requests from the city of Newport regarding an urban renewal issue that it's not actually an issue, but a potential way to help local businesses. So apparently they have some money on urban renewal right now that has not been spent, and that's a bit over $1 million that they're trying to get all the districts that it's affected by this particular urban renewal to bring the money back to a pot of money that can be distributed to some local businesses and help the ones that are having difficulty. And so we don't all of a sudden lose a whole bunch of business here in the Newport area. They haven't come up with the exact way they're gonna do that. They're still looking into putting a committee together and trying to figure out a way to how they're gonna get the money and how they're gonna distribute that money. But you'll find on my report an attachment from an email I received from the city administrator that kind of laid out the concept at this point. Eventually, they will put together a resolution once that committee has met and they have an idea how that is going to be distributed. I don't believe that it affects us much. Typically, the urban renewal funds are supposed to help certain areas within a location. In this case, because some of those are within our district, we become a part of it. But they, you know, all they would probably do is delay some of those, the work that would have been done with the funds that came to the urban renewal, but instead trying to save some of the business within the area. So take a look at that, and if anyone has any questions for me, let me know. I'll try to either answer or try to find the answers until the city actually comes back with a plan. Meanwhile, as you can see, I've been having lots and lots of meetings with our all of our partners from state to local and other ports, and lots of conversation about COVID and how we move forward. And there are more to come. I have few listed here, but I gotta say that I'm sure those will increase every other day. I add few extra meetings to it. Eventually, I would like to get back to regular business, but unfortunately right now, this is what we have in our hands. So if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer.
Okay, thank you, Paula. Does anyone have any questions for Paula on her report?
Yeah, I had one question, Jim, or actually a suggestion. You know, Paula, since there's been so much going around the boat ramp and opening around Halibut, you know, I've been talking with ODFW, and you know, they haven't made a decision. But you know, if we could get something up there about on the website, and maybe have Angela do a release about what's going on with the sport marina, just to stop the speculation, and just let everybody know and what we're going to use to make our decisions in the future. Just so they have it from us and not dockside speculation.
I believe we just added, Karen, did that make to the website?
Yes, but I posted on the website the document that Mark Brown had prepared.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, so we just put something out there, kind of lining up exactly what it's open, what is closed, and why, and our intent, you know, to continue working with the state and the county and the city. So we did put something out there, and again, today we got I got an email right before this meeting. I got an email from ODFW. Their intent now is to open the season sometime around the 14th, but they will continue working with us and letting us know the exact date. I will be having a meeting with Katie Jacobson and the commissioner and some of the ports around the area here, and trying to figure out how we can coordinate that. Again, it will be difficult for us to stay close through the 31st like the city and county if ODFW opens the season, because I don't think it would be very difficult for us to manage. Although at one point the county offered that if need be, that they could bring their sheriff out there, you know, to help us control any problems. I'd rather not have to do that. I'd rather us coordinate with the state and be able to have a concise opening, so to avoid any problems with anyone. You know, if they can delay the season and still give the people a chance to do that when the time is right, that would be our preference.
Thanks, Paul. And I know Gil asked about that before, and this is kind of for Gil. The season she's talking about are the all-depth halibut days, Gil, and on those days, if it's a really flat day and the fish are out there, you know, the ODFW is counted between 600 and 800 boats across the bar, and so that's a big injection of people in here, and that's our concern, and that's, you know, I would like to go fishing, but I also think we need to make sure that our employees are safe. But if we can open up, I think we need to make sure people can access it, as long as it's within the governor's parameters.
Well, but that's the issue, right? So, I mean, this is an interesting issue. What if the county says, wait a minute, we don't want a bunch of halibut anglers here for a weekend invading our community? I don't understand how this is consistent with this position that the coast has taken. I'm confused by this, and I'm confused by why ODFW was so adamant about this date.
It's because they're set dates.
Well, why are they set dates? Well, why can't they adjust the dates? The
It's
quota's not going to go away. They have a certain amount of quota they're managing.
it's the way the seasons are set up. It's how it's been. It's so the all depth days are only open 3 days a week, and
I understand that, but they can delay that. They still have the quota, right? Are they going to lose the quota?
they can delay them, But I was just trying to
Yeah.
give a little.
Well, I just be honest with you, I'm confused. On the other hand, I like the idea of getting people out in the open, getting them fishing. I think we can't stay locked in our homes. We're going to have to figure this out. And the port, we need to be flexible and creative to do this while
Right.
still trying to keep people safe. And we're going to have to think this through. I think trying to keep it locked down is crazy over time. We're not going to be able
Right.
to do that. But at the same time, it puts us in a really bad position between local government that's trying to keep the valley people from coming here and infecting us, and the hotels won't be open, right? These people have to come. I don't know where they're going to stay because normally they fish 2 or 3 days. They'll sleep in their boats, right, or sleep in their cars.
That's our dilemma right now.
Anyway, I think it puts the port in a difficult position. So I really appreciate Paula trying to figure this out.
When I talked to the FW, I was told that they haven't thought about the position they have put the ports and the marinas. They were sort of talking to the governor, but they didn't think about that situation and how difficult it would be for us to manage the situation. So what I was told is that they would take that into consideration based on the date we feel like we could open. Well, now that the county and city extended that through the 31st, I don't know, again, I'm still getting that email that says that they're considering, opening as a tentative May 14. It's like, okay, that's not changing from what we discussed before. So I don't know. I'm going to continue having this conversation. At least it's a tentative right now. So we still got a chance, and hopefully we can rope in the county with that on that as well, and continue talking to them. And I do need to also talk to Tillamook County, because I know they're also concerned about that. And the ports up in the Tillamook County area, they're concerned as well, and get them on board on continue working with ODFW. When I talked to ODFW, they said that there have been several ports that had that concern. Although on the other hand, there are a few charter boats that have been talking to them on not canceling or extending because they want to go out. So yeah, they're hearing from many sides.
It's difficult. Hey, one question about just changing subjects on this, on these, what the mayors asked you, the city managers to work on the, what's the name of the fees? We're beyond that now, but the
the
$1
urban
million.
Pardon me?
This is the $1 million they're asking.
Oh, the urban renewal.
Urban
Yeah.
renewal, sorry.
Yeah.
So the question is, what were those urban renewal dollars targeted originally for anything on South Beach or anything down here at all that you're aware of? Or these, you made it sound like these were leftover dollars. That they
No, they're not leftover dollars. Usually, and one thing that I haven't had a chance to really do is it's trying to understand, because since I haven't been here in this area very long, I'm very familiar with urban renewal, but I'm not familiar with this ones in particular over here. I know they have 3 urban renewal. One is at the NIT area. The other one is at South Beach, and I don't know where the other one is, but the NIT area, there isn't much in that pocket, but there is a bit of money on the South Beach area, and that is usually for improvements around the area. The whole concept of urban renewal is to revamp an area that is in need. So putting infrastructure and things like that to attract more businesses, so you can continue, getting more tax money by the improvements you're making. So I haven't seen yet what exact that money it was targeted for. So often what they do is they collect the money, put it in an account until, you know, that they're ready for that particular project, you know, whatever that is. So that is one area that I still want to understand well before we go up for any voting or anything. I want to understand what does that mean for that area, for instance, and how that would eventually benefit, you know, port property and so on. But at the same time, you know, that would, I believe they may be looking into, I don't know if it's loans for the businesses that are in need, and that money eventually would end up returning, you know, but it will keep business from going down under. So I still have a lot to understand out of this whole concept.
Okay. So we're not trying to give you a vote here to do it or not
No.
right now. This is
No,
just
again, any questions you may have, you're welcome to bring them up. That way I can continue asking the questions and come back with some good answers for you. So, and actually I have one more comment if you're done with that, unless you have more questions
yes.
on it.
Nope, done with that.
I guess Jim mentioned that maybe I should bring that up on my report, and I didn't. So yesterday I got a call from our Commissioner Sarah Scanza saying that she wants to resign from the port for personal reasons, and I was expecting to receive something in writing today, but I haven't yet. As soon as I do, I'll bring that up, and I guess then at that point we have to go through the process of trying to fill her position. So
I'm assuming we'll post that and go through that whole process as soon as we receive the letter.
that's correct.
Okay.
Yeah, we have the process down. Since we had a resignation just less than a year ago, and we had to go through that process. That's how we got Gil on board, and then we'll try to go through the same process.
Okay.
And I gotta
Thank
say, I'm very, very sad to see Sarah resigning. I have worked very closely with her through my first year here. She's been very fair and very open and good listener. And yeah, I'm sure I enjoy working with all of you, but certainly I'm gonna miss her as well.
It's definitely a loss to the port.
Yes, for sure.
Okay, anything else for Paula?
Just very sorry to see Sarah go. Do you need us to announce the vacancy, or do we need to formally announce it? Or that's the only thing I would ask of.
Probably need to wait until we have a formal letter.
Okay. Thanks.
Okay, next item, commissioner reports. Gil?
Yeah, I do have one real quick. So I'm on the Cascade West Area Commission on Transportation, right? I was appointed to that. And I guess my question to all of you is, what am I trying to do on that commission? Because they report to ODOT and the commissioners, and most of it's about bridge and roads and highways. So the question to the port, even though they mention ports, right? The federal government runs programs, Department of Transportation, that includes ports and funding for ports. And Paula, you may have applied for that in the past, right? You may have money available for ports. I was looking at some very big grants they give out, some very big grants, $10, $15, $20 million. Yeah. And there's stimulus money. That's all part of the stimulus money the feds did. That 1.7 trillion includes money for transportation, actually in that package. It's amazing what's in that 1.7 trillion. But I'm trying to figure out what the port needs for me, for that committee, to
Mhm.
work on transportation when, from what all I can tell, it's really about roads and bridges.
Well, my,
Go ahead.
I
go
can
ahead,
answer
sorry.
that too.
In my experience, Gil, that is the group that basically, whenever there are funds coming into Oregon, that's coming from the federal level that is managed by the state, or other funds such as Connect Oregon, for instance, which is a big one, that is usually managed by that group. So they look at that group for insight and what your needs are and so on and so forth. I know I have worked with them in the past for Connect Oregon, as well as they're like Department of Aviation at the time had some grants, for instance, and I worked with a committee because the previous port I worked with had an airport. So in that case, it's a bit different. We don't have an airport, at least the port doesn't, but we have a dock, we have a terminal, and there's opportunities sometimes that funds may come, and it may be Connect Oregon, maybe other funds that we want to keep our attention on and making sure. And not only that, but like for instance, if we get business here and there's cargo and there's need for, how do we handle truck traffic and things like that? Those are things we got to pay attention on and stay on top of it. To an extent, a lot of that is more relationship until something comes up that is of our interest. But we shouldn't lose sight of anything that may, benefit the port or the areas. Sometimes, sometimes we're not going to be looking at just the port itself, but the region here, sometimes they have things that indirectly may benefit, Newport or the port. So those are the type of things that is my suggestion. It's just to, participate, create a relationship, and trying to see what is out there, and if anything, directly or indirectly, can benefit the port or the region.
Okay, well, I think what I'll do, Paula, is just meet with you one-on-one and talk about this, because they are actually looking for ideas as part of a new 5-year plan, and they
Yep.
want. So the question is, what kind of ideas, concepts make sense that could support the port, whether it has to do directly with the port or with transportation to the port from roads, and if there's anything that you guys have been thinking about with respect to this. So I'll give you a call and we'll chat about it.
Sounds good.
And besides that, and then I'll just try to get to know everyone on the committee, right? By distance for now.
So, Gil, this is Walter. That's actually a very important one to belong to, like Paula said, especially when it comes to Connect Oregon money, because Connect Oregon now, in the past, it wasn't available, but now it will be for replacement and building of new port infrastructure. And the way it works is when we get our grant proposals for Connect Oregon for our projects, they all go into a pile there, and the group will vote on which ones to pass forward. So an active participation in there will allow us to get a foot in the door and lobby for our positions. And
So the Cascade. Oh, okay.
Yeah,
So
each area has their own one, and so that's why it's very important.
Yep.
Of all the ones we
I
belong
get
to,
it.
and so this is where you need to make sure and just know that a couple of the county commissioners weren't very happy with us a few years ago, but this is very important for us to get grants and just to get a pulse on where the things are going to go.
Yeah, I hadn't heard about the Oregon Connect thing in the last couple
so
of
no,
meetings.
that's
I'm just
why it's
figuring
very
it out.
Yeah.
So, okay, that's very useful. Yeah, Walter, that's great. Thank you. That's very useful.
And you're actually a very good person to do that, Gil, because you're very it's
very well.
what you like to do.
Okay. All right, thanks, Walter. Butter me up. Thanks.
Walter, do you have anything to add for your report?
I have been sheltering in place like a good person, and that's what I can say.
Okay, thank you. How about you, Jeff?
I just wanted to say we're going to miss Sarah. She's meant a lot to the port these past 3 years. Also, we're looking at whiting season coming up May 15th. And, right now everything's a go. Hoping there aren't any hiccups. So, and that's all I got.
Okay, thank you, Jeff. Any comments on the calendar for future considerations?
Actually, I have one small comment. So as you see here on Thursday, we do have the Commercial Fishing Users Group Committee. And I know, Jim, you on that committee, and
Yep.
so was Sarah. So since Sarah is not going to be participating, I wonder if anybody else would like to replace her on this committee, or what should we do about it?
Looks
Jeff?
like we have a volunteer, Jeff.
I could.
Okay,
I
Unless somebody
hear you,
else wants to.
Jeff.
so maybe Karen can send an invite so he can participate. Is that where those invites come from?
Yes, I will add him to those invitations.
Okay, thank you,
Thank you,
Karen.
Jeff.
I don't see it on the agenda, but I should have another opportunity for public comment. If anyone has a public comment for the good of the meeting. I think we have a few people on there. Okay, no public comment, and I think we will be able to adjourn the meeting at 8:12 on April 28th.